ここいるんだ。
本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
こんなとこに。
I miss you.
What's good, Internet? It is February 2017, and you are listening to Waypoint Radio live from Lobby 1,
Yeah.
where we are trying to show you how to cook up summer in the winter, to quote Kanye West. Joining me, Danielle Riendeau.
Hi.
Patrick Klepek.
Good to be here.
Hello.
Hi. How's it going, everybody?
It's great.
I'm back from vacation. I was sort of back Friday. We talked about Zelda, and then I just played 3 days of Zelda, which I'm not allowed to talk about, sadly. That's all I want to talk about.
That and Get Out, which we can't talk about.
We can talk about Get Out. Well, we can talk about Get Out a little bit.
I mean, you can talk about it in the end, and I'll get off the Skype call.
That's a possibility.
Let's talk about it broadly.
Yeah.
I just want to torture you, Patrick, because I know you're a big fan of horror film.
Yeah. If there's anything I'm sensitive to spoilers on, it is horror films. So
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Here's what I want to say. Mm-hmm. I saw Get Out on a whim, which is like the sort of thing you can do when you're on a vacation.
It's lovely.
So I went to vacation. I went to vacation.
You did. You went to vacation.
Which is the name of where people go to vacation in like a dystopic future setting.
Well, it's also the state name of Maine is Vacation Land.
Is it?
Yeah.
Do
So
they
you can say I
understand-
went to vacation and go to Maine.
Do they understand that that's like where, like, in some like brutal sci-fi film, that's where the old people go to die?
I mean, it's also where every single Stephen King novel is set.
True.
So
There you go.
maybe they do know.
So I went to LA on vacation with some friends. A friend of mine was getting married. My friend Art Tebble. Shout outs to Art. Sorry, Art Martinez Tebble. Art Tebble Martinez. I'm getting it backwards.
One of
just
the-
say all the versions of it, and one of them will be
Arthur
fine.
Tebble Martinez is a cast member on Friends of the Table. Good friend of mine. Shout outs to
Awesome.
Art. He got
Congrats.
married. A beautiful ceremony. Great vows. The person who's the officiant almost did the groom's vows by him, not the vows, but he almost married the bride in question. It was very close. And while I was out there, I was reminded that Get Out was coming because the ad campaign out there is fantastic for it. In certain neighborhoods, there are signs that say, "Do you belong here?" and then next to it, "Get Out." And then in other neighborhoods, there are signs that say, "You don't belong here, get out." And it's the most striking film ad campaign I'd seen in a while. And so I was like, oh, right, that's coming out soon. I need to see that. And for people who aren't familiar, this is a film by
Jordan Peele.
Jordan is his first name?
It's
Yeah.
Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele of Key
I
and
always
Peele.
think of Key and Peele as just Key and Peele, and then
Right,
I have
that's
to do
wrong.
a Google search to figure out
Yes.
which one
is
which.
Keegan Michael Key and which one is Jordan Peele.
It's his first film, too.
Obviously, Key and Peele is a great comedy show. Keanu was a fantastic film. I think I've spoken before about watching Keanu edited on a plane, which is a funny way to
that's
watch
even
that movie.
better. Yeah.
And Get Out. And so I came back, and then on a whim, I saw Get Out on Saturday with a friend, and I really loved that movie. We're not a movie podcast, but
It's all right.
I really loved that
We loved
movie.
it, so
yeah,
it's fair.
Danielle also saw it. We didn't get to hang out and see it together, sadly.
Sure.
We just happened to
Sorry.
both see it over the weekend. And the setup for Get Out is a setup that I am intimately familiar with, which is you have the main character is a black photographer. I'm not intimate with that part. I'm black. I'm not a photographer. Who has a white girlfriend and who is going to meet her parents for the first time upstate in New York, and who is nervous about that fact, and nervous about the fact that she has not told them that. That is the premise. And just speaking from the trailers, things go horribly wrong in many different ways.
Yeah.
And what results is a sort of is the kind of representation of a sort of fear that I don't see represented in film ever, which was fantastic. What did you think about it, Danielle?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it in every way. And my girlfriend is Latino, so not in any way exactly the same thing, but she said her immediate reaction to watching the movie was, this is what it's like to be in a room full of white people sometimes. Like, just a weird,
Right.
eerie vibe sometimes of being the only person of color in a room.
Yes.
And it's, at
There are
its broadest level.
expectations at work, which is really
Exactly. Like having to sort of speak for everybody of color, that sort of thing. And it's incredible because it's a horror movie where the monster or the concept that is horrible is racism itself. And specifically, and no spoilers whatsoever, but there's a sort of fetishization at work there that I think is utterly brilliant. You really need to see it, Patrick.
Yeah. So for me, the thing that was so striking was, so a couple of days before, I kind of framed this in the sense of with the wedding up top, not because I was the only black person at the wedding. I wasn't.
Sure.
Also one of the members of the wedding party. One of the bride has the last name of Martinez, is a person of color, is a woman of color. But because during this wedding, I got into a conversation with my friends who were the cast members and production team on Friends at the Table, my tabletop group. And we got into a conversation about how we should do a horror game in the future as one of our big tabletop seasons, because there's some fantastic horror games. In fact, we started playing one called 10 Candles, in which you literally turn off all the lights in the house and you play around 10 candles, and as each phase of the game goes on, you blow a candle out.
That's good.
And as you do that, the agency shifts from the players to the GM, so the GM gets more and more control. It's so good, Patrick. The next time you're in town, we need to play 10 Candles, because
I like that.
It's so good. But we were talking about how I was nervous about ever doing a tabletop horror game, because I want the show to be a place where we tackle things, capital T things, and not just a fun goof around space inside of genre fiction. I'd like that to be a space where I get to talk about capitalism and othering and stuff like that. And so a horror game would have to be really scary about things I'm actually scared about, like getting lost in the woods in rural America, or driving into predominantly white spaces where I don't feel necessarily super safe. And then so from going from that conversation to seeing Get Out and seeing those fears, and not just the fears, but the ways in which those fears are dismissed as being irrational, represented so clearly, was just really inspiring to see someone just nah, I'm just going to tell the story of this. This is already a horror story before anyone gets hurt, before anyone's afraid, before anyone's afraid in that about violence, or afraid about it's scary to go into those spaces because you've lost your footing and you don't know what might happen next. The first time one of my first partners was white, and when I went to meet their parents, their father, who was a white merchant marine, the first thing he said to me when we were alone in the house together was that he knew 20 different knots. He could tie 20 different knots. Which is one of those things that doesn't mean anything.
But it means a lot.
But it means a lot.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that's
Good
also
God.
just dads and daughters,
yeah.
Of course, whatever.
Yeah, that's also
but
that's a complicating fact. That's an X factor.
It is definitely.
But it's also we drove past a plantation in Maryland on the way to their house, right? So that everyone in the community revered, because it's this beautiful estate, and it's okay, and so to see a film so accurately portray that stuff, which on its face is already really striking. It's the first time I've been tense during a horror movie in a decade, right? I've not been. I like horror movies a lot, but I don't get invested in the way that I think some people do. And I'm not. That's not a diss to those people at all. I wish I still had that. I have kind of a fun genre aficionado removed from it. I'm oh wow, how are they going to use that trope, or how are they going to play with this? And this is the first time that I've been okay, oh please, and that's a good feeling to have. So highly recommend it.
I would say it's great to watch it in theaters as well, to have the communal viewing experience for this movie in particular, because people were definitely cheering, they were clapping, they were screaming. It was this incredible. I think a lot of us watch movies, at home now, have a nice little entertainment system kind of thing going on. And this was very much worth seeing this with a group of people who are into it and interested and want to be there and invested. Yeah.
So $5 million budget that they did, $30 million opening weekend.
Oh man, that's great.
Good on them. And also Blumhouse, this is it's cool that they did this movie. If you're going to work in that, and I think Patrick, you can speak to this a little bit, in fact, I would love your take on the rise of Blumhouse over the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, but it's essentially starting with Paranormal Activity. Essentially, would put them on the map.
What do you think about them and their style of cheap budget, low budget, like almost sometimes experimental horror films?
Yeah, I mean, they're a company that just throws everything at the wall and sees what sticks. Yeah. I mean, like, you'd be shocked, I think, if you looked and saw how many films they're behind and a part of. And a lot of them fail and a lot of them do poorly, but they have the mind of rather make the movie and see where it goes.
Right.
And like, yeah. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see what he does after Get Out, because he said he's been encouraged. He's a big fan of horror films, and he wants to make more socially conscious thrillers, is how he put it. And I think that would be, because I mean, if you look at some of the horror films that have done really well in the last 18 months, like there's a socially conscious element to those films that allow them to rise out of genre fodder. And that's, as someone that is a fan of the medium, it's always exciting for me when people who don't necessarily aren't like me, who are like going to the Netflix horror tab or iTunes tab and just desperately hoping you'll find something new because you've already wrung out the well so badly. It's always nice when people can kind of like, who aren't genre aficionados, come over and kind of like see what I'm spending a lot of time in, but they get kind of exposed to because a game kind of breaks through the like Split did that
or a movie
in January as well.
Was that also Blumhouse? Was that them also?
Yes. Pretty much all of M. Night Shyamalan's films as part of his revival have been associated with Blumhouse. He was also Blumhouse also did The Visit, which was an exceptionally good horror film from M. Night the year before. And Split, I think there are complicated questions to bring up about that film and how it treats mental illness. But it does try to bring in the conversation about mental illness into its core plot line, which I think gives it a certain social consciousness. Whether it gets it right or wrong is a separate conversation. But I don't think there's a coincidence that films like that are finding larger audiences. And also Get Out is like, there aren't many horror films that are explicitly tailored towards like the African American community, and like big shock that this movie, it was not only is it good, but like big shock that there's like an audience that never gets any films, about them, finds an audience.
This is like the interesting thing for me about horror as a genre, but also just B-movie, cheaper film, exploitation film, that like when you look at the history of cinema, there are these moments where people start making films on the cheap, and by doing that, there's a bit of a freedom there to where you can start making films that target niche audiences, smaller demographics, and that in the process, often or sometimes when we're lucky, allow marginalized creators to become involved as creators. And it's not ideal. Like the ideal is Moonlight wins the Oscar, which hey,
yes,
nice. And that Hollywood in general becomes blacker and browner and queerer, and like we just get this great mix of the actual diversity of the world involved in creative industries. Like, and that's happening also. But one of the nice things about seeing this come out of Blumhouse for me is like, yes, use the fact that you can make a $5 million movie to give it to someone who's going to do something wild with it, and like go for it. Also, I'm hoping that it's on the model that a lot of their stuff is, which is that the people who sign up to do it don't necessarily get paid a lot, but do get points on stuff or do get royalties if it does super well. Because I know a lot, that's how they convince some bigger name talent to get involved with their projects. It's like, hey, listen, like Jennifer Lopez, we're not going to pay you $10 million to be in this. We're not going to pay you $5 million. But if it does really well, like you're going to get a percentage in a way.
If you go look at their catalog, like you'll find movies that you've never heard of that bombed and that did very poorly, that have like huge stars in it because they make so many of them. They explicitly line out their schedule to fit in between like big films that stars are doing, and stars, like anyone else, like to work. And so, okay, I'm not going to make a lot of money on this, but I might make points on the back end. And these movies shoot for like 3 weeks and then they're done.
And they're done.
Yeah, it's the same way. Actually, weirdly, Uwe Boll is how he operated. Was that he would explicitly find actors that just wanted to do a job. And that were clearly outside of his caliber of films you usually associate with, but they just like, oh sure, I'll show up for 2.5 weeks and do a
and knock it out really quick.
And that's how you get Ben Kingsley in an Uwe Boll film.
Yep.
So I don't know. I recommend the movie like incredibly highly. And like so like there are only a couple of jump scares. You should push yourself to go see it if you're on the verge. If you know that like you can push yourself to go see a horror film, I'd say this is one of those times that you should do it. Yeah. Obviously, there are people who know themselves well enough to know like, no, it's not for me. Period. I get it, but
yeah, I would call it more like super disturbing than gory or
right.
That's why the distinction in like iTunes stuff exists between horror and thriller. Right. And I would say probably Get Out, having not seen it, strikes me as a movie that falls like thriller still means you can be on edge. It might get you, but it's like I think the term horror means something a little bit different than what the term thriller means to.
I think this is a horror movie, but it's maybe riding that line.
It's rides the line. But maybe I'm just wrong because when I think of thriller, there's an entire genre of like 90s like crime thrillers that come the term like psychological thriller is in my head of just like Samuel L. Jackson or Denzel Washington or someone in a suit and like a long coat and they're tracking down like a serial killer who collects bones or like it's Seven.
There was a movie called The Bone Collector.
I know
in that era.
There sure is. Yeah, isn't Jennifer Lopez in it?
She might be.
There's a good chance.
Or was that Angelina Jolie? I forget.
It might have been. I don't know. But like that's what's in my head. Or even or The Lovely Bones or lots of bones involved with psychological thrillers.
Movies.
Bones and like young dead children or
lots
women.
Of dead kids, dead
serial
women,
killers.
Bones.
Bones
and boobs.
Bones and boobs, movies. Welcome to our new podcast, Bones and Boobs.
Bones and boobs.
We talk about movies.
Women in horror.
There it is, Bones and Boobs, Women in Horror.
Anybody who has a podcast about women in horror, there you go.
Tim, tell Motherboard I got a new podcast idea for them.
Actually, I'd be super down for that.
That'd be a really good podcast.
Horror, so.
We'll just make podcasts. I don't know. Make us podcast.vice.com. We'll get it done.
We did it.
No one can buy us podcast.vice.com, thankfully, because that's not how it works. Other than that, how has everything been going? I guess, like, speaking of horror, loosely, kind of, Night in the Woods. It's scary in the woods at night.
It's very scary in the woods at night.
I hear
there's a lot of existential horror in that game, too.
Have you both been playing it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I've played 3 or 4 hours. I don't know, like
that's about where I'm at.
5 days into the game or something like that. I'm not sure exactly of the structure.
I played on the plane back from LA, so I got like 3 or 4 hours in.
Such a perfect context to play that game in.
Brief disclosure: Scott Benson, who worked on the game, is like friend of the site, sort of, kind of. It's like a
Twitter friend?
Dude I've known on Twitter for a long time.
Twitter friend.
It's like close enough that while we think we could be fully objective, maybe take our opinions with a grain of salt.
I like that dude's tweets. That's it.
It's a good tweeter,
Yeah. So what do you think so far?
I love it.
Tell me about it. What is Night in the Woods?
So it's a 2D story-based game. It's largely like interactive fiction with a sort of animated platforming element to it, but with other interactive elements. Mario Talk. Super Mario Talk. Starring May, the kitten.
The kitten.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a point. Everyone in this game is an animal.
Yes.
And also, it does the Disney thing. Everyone in this game is an animal wearing clothes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, they call themselves people and act as though they are above other creatures.
Including
true.
Cats.
And squirrels.
And like, there are just... Those animals are also in the world.
It's like the BoJack thing, where they did that episode with the farm and the chickens.
It's very strange.
Oh.
And so like, I guess give people a setup on what
So you're May, you're a cat, and you are a college sophomore who has just dropped out of college. You come home, and you're sort of back in your hometown. You're back with your parents, you're back with your old high school friends. It's been like a year and a half or something like that since you went away, and there's sort of a backdrop of something went wrong. Something happened in May's past, and you sort of digging at what that is. So there's a darkness to it. And there's also definitely a lot of thematic stuff going on with, like, this is a Rust Belt city. A lot of jobs have gone away. This is sort of a depressed town. So that's also
one of the things that's interesting to me about this game, one of the things that I think makes it stand out as a narrative about a 20-something who's returning home is that in my lifetime and in my my limited view of the world. The stories that I've seen the most that match this are 20-something comes home, has grown up and left behind hometown, is stuck in hometown, is miserable about it, feels like hometown. There's some of the miseries there.
Yes.
But it tends to be like, I'm too big for this little place. I lived in the city, or I went to school, and now I'm stuck in my parents' place, and this place is backwards. And the thing that I like about the first few hours so far about Night in the Woods is May comes home and has not grown up, and everybody else has. Everybody
Yes.
else, all of her old friends have gotten jobs. The people that she's known personally have moved on in life. They feel like adults. There's lots of like, yeah, you're still a kid. I'm an adult now. I'm dealing with adult stuff. You left and didn't grow up. And obviously there's something happening there just in its own merit that's really good. But I also do like that as this interesting inversion of the kind of like city versus rural thing that happens in media in general.
Or the idea that like going to college means growing up, because
Right.
it
It doesn't
honestly
necessarily.
means
Totally.
the opposite.
Totally.
Of
I mean,
so,
there was a sort of like an interesting take on the dignity of like service labor in this game.
Yeah.
That like, no, it's totally chill to work at the pizza place. Like that's a job, and that's a good job.
You're
like,
making your money, you're
might not
paying
be
your rent.
It might not be
Yeah.
the best job in the world. It'd be great to be more upwardly mobile, but like you're paying rent, and like that's not a bad thing. And I really am interested in that depiction of small town America. That at the same time is still like all the jobs are disappearing. So it's still engaged with that question, but is also not dismissive of the people in that space.
It's not looking down at people.
Yeah,
basically.
it feels
It's
like
not
it could only have
punching
been
down.
written by someone who grew up there. Like it would be difficult to like as an outsider write this game. I think like the way that you are non-judgmental, the way that it doesn't like it doesn't feel overtly political, but by its very nature, like you get a sense of that sort of thing, and like how thing like trade and manufacturing has altered this town over time.
Right.
But it just feels like as someone that spent most of their youth swapping between a like middle class, upper middle class Illinois predominantly white suburb, and then a like very Rust Belt, very tiny, like hundreds of people Wisconsin town where like everyone goes to the one bar because there only is the one bar. It's a pretty good bar though. I like that bar. It's a lot of it, like it's a very mundane game, and like a lot of that mundaneness like speaks to me, and a lot of what I experienced growing up of just like the idea of like, what are we going to do today? I don't know, go to the mall. It's a shitty mall. It's something to do.
It's something
and it's
to
like,
do.
That was like a lot of my, and they this world exists in a post-internet, whereas like a lot of my framing for that is like pre-internet, or like the origins of the internet. So some of that was born out of just there weren't other things to do. But I think it felt like a very quintessentially Midwest sort of thing, where it's just like, yeah, let's like go down to the rundown mall and just walk around and go to the hat store because I don't know, it's there.
Yeah. So I was born in a town called Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, which is like a former coal mining town.
Yeah.
It's the sister city to Scranton, where The Office took place.
Great.
So like that's where I was born, and is like that exact sort of rundown Rust Belt place. And then I spent a lot of time in London, Ontario, where I was doing PhD work, which is also a former industrial place that very recently lost all of its jobs, all of its manufacturing jobs. Like it used to build trains, and while I was there, the last train factory shut down. And so like it's like such a different environment for a game to take place in. So like on its face, I'm already into it. That like, oh wow, cool. Here's a space that you just never see rendered in a game. But that also just to have it done that well is really cool. Just to see that like, how do people live here and have fulfilling lives? And then also, in what ways do they feel stuck, or do they feel limited, or do they feel disconnected from the town's own history because things have changed? Like that to me has been the thing that I've seen in all of these places that I've been, where there is this notion of, this is why like Trump's message hit these places really well, is because there is an active memory or a missing memory of what came before. So for some people, they can literally remember being 12-year-olds when their parents were working at or around the coal mines or around the factories, and they have that memory of things being better there then. And another thing I like about this is just like, oh yeah, there's all these statues of these people who are supposedly important around town who did something, but like they're not my people. I don't remember them directly. And that stuff is like, it just resonates really well with me.
Yeah.
Also, there's a cool dungeon crawler in that game.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. There's like a fully fledged dungeon crawling sort of
like action
game that is on the virtual OS. Which I'm also like a big fan of this trend from the last 5 years of virtual OSs. That's cool with me. But yeah, I mean, and also just it's very funny and charming. The dialogue is probably I'm hard pressed to like think of a game like Firewatch. I thought also had like some of the best dialogue, I guess when I say best, I mean natural sounding.
Yes, like naturalistic. Like it feels like people talking.
It feels like people. Well, I would draw a distinction. Like Firewatch. And maybe this is also because Night in the Woods doesn't have voice acting. It's strictly textual, whereas Firewatch had probably the most like natural sounding dictated like spoken out dialogue I had heard in a video game either in a long time or probably ever. Night in the Woods feels more like it is very natural sounding, but it also feels like internet talk. Yes. Like it feels like a lot of people talking to each other through IM clients as opposed to how they would necessarily say it if they were actually talking to someone, but it feels very natural reading it textually that I think it works in the context of the game, even if that's not how people would actually talk to themselves in real life. It does feel like how we would talk to each other through like, G-Talk or AIM or something like that. And so in that respect, because you're reading it, it just feels incredibly natural. And if you go and read Scott Benson's Twitter account, it also just feels like you're reading just like a whole, book of dialogue written by, like he just dumped himself into this game. It is just Scott Benson writing a bunch of characters. Good. But I found myself genuinely laughing at this game in a way that I don't usually, and not laughing at like setups and punchlines, just laughing because like I don't know. I just found it very charming in a way that has kept me going, even if sort of the act of playing it where it's like, oh, it's another day. Let's go talk to the same people. Let's jump up on the buildings again. Like that part, this game I don't think necessarily benefits from marathon sessions. I think this game benefits from checking in on it, playing a day of it, of the in-game cycle, and then coming back. Because I found when I've sat down for like 2 hours, I feel myself wandering a little bit because the actual act of playing it, there isn't a whole lot to it, and you start to. I feel like I'm stretching it sometimes when I'm playing it in long sessions, as opposed to just I'm going to check in with this for 45 minutes and then I'll come back to it tomorrow.
Makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
To me.
Yeah.
I love how heartfelt it is. I love how it's something that I never see in games and very rarely see in fiction, but somebody who has problems, somebody who has emotional issues, somebody has some shit going on, maybe with their sexuality or that kind of thing, but still has a loving family.
Right.
That is a thing I so rarely see, and it's something that I almost teared up just even playing it and being like, oh, your mom and dad love you. And it's really nice to come home to them, even though they don't understand anything you're going through.
Right.
They still
you
love
have
you.
in-jokes, and you have a relationship with them. I was talking to Scott on Twitter also, and had mentioned Alex Navarro of Giant Bomb and I were both talking about how much we liked May's mom as a character.
So good.
And Scott was like, I notice a very clear generational divide between people who like the parents and people who don't like the parents. Like, the older you are, the more likely you are to think those parents are pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
And like, I believe it.
Yeah, I believe that
The relationship
too.
with your parents changes a lot over like from 20 to 30 something, you
Hell
know?
of a lot.
So yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I'm very curious to see how it goes. I know that I feel the edge of something about to twist and turn and spiral into something else.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that to happen. So I'm going to hopefully finish that up by Friday. I mean, maybe check back in on that.
Yeah.
I do want
catch
to
up.
briefly shout out more writing in games. This is the thing I just realized I can mention because I noticed writing in it in the first 5 hours, and I can still talk about it. I've snuck Zelda back onto this podcast.
Yeah.
The writing in Zelda is really good, is all I'll say. Surprisingly good. Also, like, really endearing and heartfelt and surprisingly natural. The localization team did an incredible job on that from what I saw in the first 5 hours, let's say. Not any past that.
Only in the first 5 hours.
Only in the first 5. Thankfully, I got to meet a couple of characters and see how they were written, and I'm only evaluating it on those characters. So who knows? By the end of the game, I could hate the writing. But
it seems like maybe they've finally, not that the games haven't had a voice in the past, but it seems like this one maybe has a sharper one or a more defined one, or they've allowed themselves to be a little more. Well, look, you posted that tweet about the thirsty bow girl and like
lonely archer girl.
Yes, like Fire Emblem, like in the past, has been like the one section where like Nintendo kind of gets a little wilder. It's like After Dark Nintendo happens in Fire Emblem, but it sounds, and not just to say that like sexual innuendo is like the definition of like being creative or
No.
interesting. But it sounds like just generally speaking, you seem to have noticed that they've allowed themselves to kind of stretch their muscles a little bit in this game and give it a more sort of defined tone.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I would love to, Patrick, you should talk to the localizers on this. I'd love to hear what their thought process was at some point.
Yeah.
It's a pitch meeting now. We're going to go over our stories for the next month, and we'll find something really good for you to track down. The thing with it is that it does feel like it has a voice, and like a specific, it feels like someone sat down and said, okay, what is the voice of the author of this story almost? Like how should this shouldn't just be a generic fantasy game, and it shouldn't just be the sort of high fantasy default thee and thou stuff of kind of other fantasy games, including some past Zelda games. It should really feel like it has, and I keep wanting to come back to voice, I'm trying to find another analogy for it, or another term. It feels like there are the characters in the game, everything they say could be boiled down to a fact, and then they worked over that fact until it was a little busier, a little more mushy with personal details. Yeah. It's a game that's really interested in the ways in which the culture of a character influences how they speak, and then also the ways in which people see the world through their own characters' lenses. So that's all I'll say about that for now. And we'll keep talking about it next week. It's all I want. Or on Friday, we'll talk a lot about it again, probably, because it's all I want to talk about. Yeah, that's my Zelda update.
Very exciting.
I think we're going to turn quickly to the question bucket. We're running a little bit late today, so I'm going to maybe get one or two questions, and then we'll call it.
Until someone yells at you to get out of the room.
Someone like walks behind us and knocks on these doors and says, "Get out."
There's usually like a double pass. Like somebody walks by, looks in.
They do a little peek,
and then does this sort of drive-by staring.
Are you almost out? Are you guys almost? Because we need it. We booked it. We're actually getting audio channels.
Austin. You need to get out.
No.
Well, funny story, Patrick. Twice. I like working at Vice. I like being here a lot. I have a good job. I like everyone I work with.
Yep.
Twice while I was out. Twice. Someone confused Tim for me.
And I really think Tim. Yes, Tim. Please show how ridiculous this is.
Tim looks like I almost get it.
No.
You have to squint. No,
maybe
I
from
don't
behind.
get it.
No.
Maybe from behind.
No. I have one. I have glasses. 2, our hair is different. 3, there's a lot of differences.
You have different eye colors.
We do have different eye colors.
Like, just, you look totally different. I just,
Welcome to America.
Yes. Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
Well, it was extra confusing because there were emails necessary. There was like a lot of just like, I had like my out of office email on, which is like a thing. Which is like, oh, I'm not here. And then this person saw Tim and was like, you say you're out of office. You're just trying to avoid emails. I'm like, oh, no.
It's also reasonable to assume, though, that you would come to the office because you did come to the office while you were on vacation. So let's not say that's not.
Can we just talk about how I hid Zelda and a Switch in unmarked boxes for you? I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I didn't run home and play it. Just wanted to let that be known.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Patrick. I'm going to look at a question. This comes in from Jonathan. I'm just skimming from the top. It's Monday. Skim from the top of the bucket. Jonathan Holland writes us.
What's up, Holland?
What's up, Holland? Hey, I'd first like to say I'm a huge fan of the site. And one of the things that most appeals to me is that many of Waypoint's members are people further along in their lives, late 20s/early 30s folks who balance real-life concerns with a healthy love for gaming. I'm curious if you've experienced something that I've noticed in the past few years, that game length has become increasingly important, and possibly the most important criteria of a game fan. A recent example is something that I've had on my backlog for a while, Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii. I finally dived in this October and immediately loved it. The environments, music, combat characters, everything meshed really well for me. I had recently joined that post your favorite 7 games trend that was going around Twitter, and within a few hours I was thinking I would need to amend that list to include Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm pretty busy both at work and at home, and so it took me a while to get through the game, a long while. By the time I finished the game a week ago, I was mostly glad to be able to put it to rest. But unlike other experiences in the past, it didn't feel like it had worn out its welcome. On the contrary, as the game got further and further along, I found it even more compelling. The ending wasn't a letdown. There was a point where the game, there wasn't a point where the game got bad. The experience never got worse, but I just felt that while I loved it, I didn't love it enough for it to have been worth spending 3 to 4 months pouring the entirety of my gaming free time into it. This example is just kind of a capstone in my last few years, in which my first response when thinking of playing something is to look at howlongtobeat.com, which is a website where you can.
It's like the only bookmark I have on my phone.
I'm with you completely. If that number is too high, it immediately loses most, if not all, of my enthusiasm. In contrast, a game that initially sounds all right to me, if I see it's only 8 hours, my ears perk up. There are games like XCOM and Endless Legend that I really like, but after years of saying, I'll get back to this, I've kind of accepted that I'm never going to truly play them. I hope to someday enjoy The Witcher 3. I just can't see when that will be. Possibly because it's so fresh in my mind, I'm thinking about how this is going to impact my experience playing Breath of the Wild. My question is, have you experienced something similar as you get older? Games where your experience suffers because of their length, not because they feel padded or stretched out or run out of ideas, but just because they're too much game. How do you discuss these games or adequately rate them, or accept that you might love this game but you'll never truly get into it? Thanks, Jonathan. Good question.
My life.
I know.
My life.
I think we're in situations too where it's this combination of like we're getting older and we have other experiences. You have a baby, Patrick. Danielle, you have another podcast. You have boxing and other sports. I'm working all the time that there is. And so on top of being older, we also like have to like, oh, it's gonna be a 30-hour game. Fuck, how am I gonna fit that into my schedule?
It's just thinking. It's actually painful to think about. It's like physically painful because you have serious FOMO going on there often, at least I do, but also like I know my week. I know I'm going to have 5 free hours this week. Like literally those are the hours in which I can do a thing that is not work or one of my hobbies
another hobby
or like
or
a
ENT
scheduled thing.
Right.
And it's like, all right, it's that or something better, and it goes into this like spiral of, oh, I need to maximize this time. This time cannot be spent playing something kind of crappy. It needs to be spent playing the
one
ultimate
true thing.
game that will be the best and most enjoyable thing I can do with that time. This is a topic we've talked about a lot on Idle Weekend, actually.
It's a shitty feeling.
It keeps coming up. Yeah.
To some degree. What about you, Patrick? Are you coming to terms with that in any way now that you've had the Jessica for a little while?
Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously our situations are complicated because like there's a certain pressure to play games even when I might use that on that free time elsewhere because I kind of need to play games in order to write about games.
Yep.
As it turns out, that is part of the job. But I actually find the thing that has impacted me the most, like especially post having a child, is yes, as Danielle mentioned, it's that maximalization, but it's also it impacts the way I play games. So for example, like open world, like part of the problem I have with like games that use like an open world conceit is like I prefer games where I can be directed to the next thing, and games that require or benefit from your own improvisation I have trouble with because nobody's got time to improvise. Send me to the next thing.
Patrick, I got bad news about Zelda for you.
Oh no.
Well, no, it's just it depends on the game. Some games I can do that, but I do find that the direction helps because it allows me to like get a sense of like I can go do this thing and then feel like this play session has been relevant,
productive,
because I've moved forward. I am productive, and like I wonder in some ways like my aversion to Mafia 3's open world, like how much was that Mafia 3? How much is that just saying like when you just go from point A to point B, the game's just not nearly as interesting as when you stop and kind of fuck with it. And I never really stopped to fuck with it because I didn't have time to fuck with it. And so like I can never quite tell sometimes how much is what I am bringing to it and how I'm playing the game, and how much is the failure of the game to either force me to improvise or be more interesting. And so that's what I often find is that I rub up against games that like benefit from you being more creative because I'm more interested in just getting there.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's, to Jonathan's feeling, the thing that I'm trying to get better at is having something in both courts. Something like Night in the Woods, which I hear is between 6 and 12 hours, depending on how quickly you go through it. I think it'll end up being closer to 12 for me because I'm trying to read everything and see everything. Yeah. Is digestible and pretty focused. Resident Evil 7 I'm also trying to get through, and it's like, oh, I can juggle a couple of those and like enjoy my time with them and get through them and move on. And then Witcher had taken on this thing for me in the background. I was like, I'm just put a couple of hours into it every week, and that'll make me feel like I'm touching it, and like I'll kind of mine away at it a little bit. I'll just like slowly like pick away at it, not in the sense that you're picking away something small, but like with a pick and just like slowly, I'm going to bring this mountain down.
That's right.
One swing at a time.
One little tiny rock at a time.
To Jonathan's question about Zelda, like I think that will have to be one of those for you. And what I would do if I was in your position is think about budgeting your time. And the way that like Danielle says she has 5 hours free, give 2 of those to Zelda and like enjoy those 2 hours and play some other smaller stuff with the remaining 3 or flip that and feel good about that. And it means that those smaller things are going to take you longer to beat because you're not going to be able to give them your whole X amount of free time a week. But like you'll actually get through those maybe one a month, and then you can also focus on this other big incredible thing. So
budgeting, it's everything,
adulthood.
every single thing about being an adult is budgeting.
Well, and
So
it's why, like when we've praised Witcher 3 in the past, and one of the things that I like the most about it is that the way it divides its objectives, it makes it very clear what is the stuff that is essentially meaningless and what is the stuff that is meaningful. And so I get very frustrated in games that try and trick you into saying that it's all meaningful. And it's like, bullshit game. Like, a lot of this is fluff, and just tell me what it is and delineate between the two, and then we're all going to be happier. And so then I get frustrated with games that aren't specific about what the difference is between the two. Like, that actually what's frustrating me about Mafia 3 was the side missions with the characters who you'd get, an occasional interesting cutscene, but the actual thing you were doing for them was just
boring,
driving across a map, and it was super boring and repetitive. And so it wasn't clear to me. Like, I eventually just asked on Twitter, is this worth the investment? Like, if there's something on the other side of this that is fascinating, I'll do it. And the consensus was basically like, nah, you saw the first cutscene, you're good. Like, you don't have to do the rest.
The thing that sucks is there was some good stuff in there for like 1 or 2 of the characters, but certainly not each of them. And that's how, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be our one question today. I do think
it's a good one.
Again, can only talk about my first 5 hours of Zelda, but I think given that experience, seriously, given that first 5 hours, it's immediately clear that the scale of that game is massive, and that, like, the thing that you're going to have to come to terms with it is, like, can I enjoy this in bite-sized chunks if that's what I can budget for in my time? And if not, like, I can totally see people who will be turned off by it, and I think that's going to be there's going to be a lot of people turned off by that game no matter what, and so it's going to be a real challenge to see if you can fit it into your life or if it's just not going to be the thing. Like, it's a less consumable product than past Zelda games.
Only play it on planes.
Only play it on planes.
Only play it on your cross-country flights.
That actually,
now that I
think about it, like that, the Switch thing, the fact that it is a thing that you could play, it's not breaking embargo to say I played it on the bus ride here today. I climbed a tower today. I climbed a tower today.
See, that's kind of great.
I'll put that. You know what I need? I need a picture of Link holding like a hang in there cat, and it just says, "I climbed a tower today," in like the Zelda font. You did it. You did it, buddy.
Yeah.
And so there are little objectives that you can go and do in that little like 20-minute bite-sized thing. So maybe being on the Switch will actually give it life that it wouldn't have otherwise for commuters who don't have to drive. If you have to drive, don't play Zelda in the car, please.
Fair.
If you're the one driving.
Fair.
Yeah, that's.
Or no, don't. I'm gonna categorically say no. Don't do it.
Don't Zelda and drive.
Well,
don't Link and drive.
Okay. This has been Waypoint Radio. You can find us at waypoint.vice.com. You can find everything we post on the internet at twitter.com/waypoint, facebook.com/waypointvice. You can find me at Austin_Walker. You can find Danielle at Danielle RI. You can find Patrick at Patrick Klepek. Listen to the track. Miss You is the name of the track. Off of Pale Machine by Bowen at waypoint.zone/BOEN.
Yes.
I think that's going to be it for us. YouTube.com/waypointvice to see all of our stuff. We are going to do a Twitch switch on Friday, a Switch stream on twitch.com/waypoint where you can see us do this.
Watch
and we're going to play
that.
lots of Switch stuff. We're going to play Zelda. We're going to play some other stuff.
He's still alive. Look.
Patrick has sunk beneath.
He's still alive. The chair's moving.
The chair.
Maybe that's a dog. I don't know.
Until then, that has been us at Waypoint. Patrick is waving. Goodbye.
Waving.
Have a good week, everybody. Until the future. Peace.